All right. What's the
Does
question?
militant preservation extend to outside of the debate space?
I think we would problematize the distinction you're making between inside and outside. That's obviously asking the wrong question, because the notion that spaces are separated by walls or demarcations is sort of the thing we're criticizing in the first place.
Okay, the criticism of demarcation, like, okay, I guess the criticism of demarcation, can you explain it?
Yeah, so the idea that in here and out there are different places, bad, because it makes us feel like what we do in here doesn't affect who we become outside of here.
Okay, how does
makes us bad people?
militant preservation, like everywhere, affect relations with Russia?
We're making an argument about militant preservation in debate. Again, you're falling
In
into the same
debate?
trap of thinking that you have the ability to affect international relations between US and Russia, which is frankly kind of deranged.
So is it in debate or out of debate?
We are making an argument about militant preservation in debate.
Okay, what do you do in debate?
We think that reading the 1AC creates the possibility for conditions and communities of care. That's a good idea for a whole lot of reasons.
What do communities of care look like under your model?
You know, like hanging out, being friends, going out to dinner.
Okay, why is the
tournaments? Because we've said that that's a good idea. You have to disprove that.
Okay, why can't you just go hang out and like not in the
yeah, I mean, if you want to like concede the debate, say the app is a good idea and is correct about how we should approach the world, we are more than happy to, you know, take you out to dinner. That's fine. Well, logistics sort of traps us in the belief that we have to constantly be improving ourselves via self-reflexivity. You'll probably make some arguments about third and fourth level testing, other kind of nonsense like that. We think that's a bad model for the way we approach debate, because it forces us to think that debate is a tool that we can utilize to become better, more advanced technocratic thinkers. That's bad. Hanging out, playing chess, whatever is a better solution.
So if debate is not like a tool that we can use, then what is the purpose of debate?
It facilitates conversation and discussion in a way that other activities don't, because we get to make arguments about the works of various scholars, think about race in nuanced and complicated ways. We think that debates that occur over militant preservation are good for discussion of strategy and tactics for resisting and kind of becoming better people. A lot of that stuff is not accessible in classrooms. Yeah, I did. Yeah, like hanging out. Help, like if like you see some, if like, you know, you got hurt, I might like, you know, try to help you out. The role of the negative, disprove the 1AC.
So say that hanging out is bad.
That could be one thing you go for. Yeah, sure. If you want to say like fun is bad, that is potentially responsive.
So what does having fun do about it?
Well, I mean, the world is like miserable, obviously. We can't really change that, but what we can do is create moments of sociality via, you know, hapticality and militant preservation. We just think it's a good idea. We just think doing that is good. Because those make me miserable, and also they're highly technocratic and are focused on things outside of the activity, which divorces and separates us from what really matters, which is the communities that we build in here, because we don't have the ability to affect policymaking broadly. Obviously, none of us are NATO member states, and role-playing as a person who has the ability to affect grand schemas of international relations results in battle fatigue. It causes us to kind of invest in hope that the world can improve and get better, which results in cruel optimism. It's terrible for our mental health. It's also super draining because we stay up all night, like, you know, popping Adderall and drinking energy drinks and playing cards, and that's not fun. And the kind of sleep debt that accumulates is the opposite of care. So actually that model of debate is just a path towards endless misery and suffering.
Arguments about like white supremacy and how there's an inevitable racial hierarchy, how there's like changing out after.
Because it refuses to capitulate to the idea that we have to structure our lives in such a way that furthers that hierarchy. We think that it's like largely inevitable, which is like the structural argument we're making with the barter evidence about the global race war. But we do think that thinking about the world differently has the potential for new innovative ideas for surviving in a world of, you know, death. Well, we think that that is why debate is important, because we could have a discussion of tactics and strategies. So, for example, different movements have had different ideas about how to do resistance. So, like the 1AC cites a lot of examples of this, like the Zapatistas, the Black Panthers with free lunch clinics and healthcare clinics. There are transnational movements such as anti-neoliberal movements in Argentina, which are Hunt evidence describes. Our argument is that sort of imagining ourselves as being, one of many kind of nodes of resistance is important, but that resistance is distinct from
So how does
telos, which is what the 1AC does that's good.
it serve as like a platform for discussion if negative?
Well, because you could disagree with our strategy, and if you win that our strategy is bad, then the debate that occurs between us and you will make us better at thinking about the world in a way that is not violent.
Whatever strategy they want to, like, how is a negative supposed to?
Well, the app always gets to choose what strategy they defend. It's called being affirmative. You read a plan, which we've done, and then you make an argument about why it is an improvement over the status quo, which we've done. The affirmative has the burden of proof and nothing else. Yeah, plan failure. That's my plan. Yeah, so plan failure is kind of elaborated by our Hunt evidence, but I think also the Melamed evidence does a good job of describing the theoretical backing behind it, which is just that we should accept the fact that whatever we do, we're going to fail. And the idea that kind of letting go of having a telos to our movement building or politics or strategy is important, because otherwise we'll have battle fatigue and cruel optimism, which makes us sad. And, a strategy that makes us even sadder than most people already are does not seem like a good one to me. What? Well, I do have a plan. It's plan failure.
How's that a plan?
Mandated
by the resolution?
What do you mean
Required
mandated?
capital.
Why is the resolution a hailing signal that we all have to adhere to? That seems super fascist and a terrible way of thinking about the world. Like a sentence exists and now you're like hailed by it. When the resolution says stop, do you stop and turn around? We think it's structure of civil society. There are ways of resisting it, but we shouldn't link our capacity for resistance to a broader idea that struggle will somehow change everything, because that's obviously silly.
I have a question. So you said that like there's structures in place right now that make it for, I guess, amendable, but they think you can be very restricted. And the Bella evidence says that with restricted, you can every level of social production.
Correct.
So how are like your hangouts insulated from that?
Well, they might not be. So the kind of point of the undercommons is that you never know you're in the undercommons until after you've already left. There's no ability to go to the undercommons, because that would obviously signal to surveillors and agents of whiteness where the resistance is happening. So,
So what's the distinction between going into the undercommons and leaving them? Because you said you can't.
well, you know when you're there.
Why?
Because you sort of like feel this like moment of sociality and care and affect that makes you see the world differently despite the ongoing suffering, and realize that there are moments of beauty that occur. So for example, like writing poetry, or going to a friend's house when they're having a bad day and kind of like taking care of them and calming them down. None of these individual activities are representative of planning as per our Melamed evidence, but instead planning is a broader ethos, which the 1AC has endorsed.
And so if planning is what you're advocating for, like when people interact, what is this like status quo way that people in debate?
Well, I mean, we think that debates that fall under the resolution's hail are debates that are violent, because it forces us to externalize our agency to make and believe in sweeping changes to the world that broadly change structures, which, I think I've iterated like a bunch of times at this point why I think that's bad.
Why do you think that people are always debate that these plans just like magically think that they're going to become all policy?
Well, if they don't, then they're just like literally wasting their time, and they're staying up all night cutting cards, making themselves miserable and sad for literally no reason.
How is that machine now?
How is it what?
Because you're advocating for.
Well, insofar as it is, we have impact turned that and said wasting time is good, because it is contradistinct to logistics.
So,
It refuses to make debate productive. It says that if you win, that the 1AC is a waste of time, then the judge should obviously vote AF because that is our argument. Oh, I mean, I have no idea if it will. I think that's irrelevant to the 1AC solvency. We think the F is a good idea. If it is, then it is. If it's not, then it's not.
So the judge should be something like, doesn't know how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of solvency is, I think, something that we've impact turned from the first place. And, you know, that's like every card we've read in the 1AC. You have to disprove the entire canon of our author scholarship in order to win that solvency is relevant. We've said that the idea of solvency is problematic and we shouldn't need to solve anything in order to win.
What is the case? I'm sorry, I didn't ask one.
What is this case? It's an argument for an ethos towards the world that we think is good. If the critic agrees that that ethos is one that should be endorsed, then they should vote affirmative.
So back to the previous question, and you said that if we don't think that the plan turns into selling actual forms in time, and that like wasting time and vote, so why reading towards the not a good way to
That's a good question. I think that the sort of statement the USFG should implies that there's an action that would be a good idea if it were to occur, which creates a tacit investment in the international order, which we think is irredeemably racist.
So is it about?
So it may be a waste of time, but it's a racist waste of time, which is worse.
So it's about like the substance of it, not like the idea.
Well, no, it's more so the form in the sense that it imagines a change to the world being good. That is in any imagination that begins with the premise that the United States federal government should do something and that it is possible that that could be good and meaningful is a premise that we have impact turned.
so I'm gonna ask a question in like the context of like you framework on like, so since you read framework on the net, like advocate for false proposals, is that how like history, the idea that the advocate idea that it's
Yeah, I mean, we think framework's a terrible argument, but it is interesting as a way to disagree with affirmatives. Also, I wouldn't read framework against my 1AC. What is the ballot key? I mean, the ballot just sort of like signals that the app is a good idea. We don't really think it accomplishes something outside of that because, you know, that sort of feeds into our broader criticism of the concept of solvency and the inside-outside dichotomy that we built in debate.
Why do you use it?
Because winning is more fun than losing, and because the ballot signifies that the 1AC is a good idea, which is what, you know, my answer has always been.
Okay. So you want to make a distinguish utilization and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so our Moten evidence, you know, funny story, actually. The cards on this didn't make that much sense, but I think the new book that we've cut for the 1AC, Moten and Harney really clarify this super well, which is, there's a couple distinctions. The first is that improvement is the path of policy and logistics in the sense that it tries to establish a pre-given telos for what a great argument or great idea or changing idea would look like, and says that we should continuously iterate towards that end goal. Obviously, you know, you might make some arguments in the 2NC about how policy debates don't result in some perfect end, but the point is that there's a trajectory where it gets better and better. We become more and more efficient. We find better and better versions of an argument. Revision is distinct from that, which is just like, we just like make changes to stuff because it's fun or because it's more interesting or because new stuff comes up and there's no end goal to it. There's no point to it. In the same way that the poet who revises a poem isn't trying to perfect that poem, but is just having different experiences.
So like earlier you were talking about how 5 years So like, why is that not?
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good argument. I think that the problem with it is that it doesn't assume the distinction I've made, which is that those discussions of resistance are useful because of the discussion itself. Like those debates produce moments of sociality and care between the debaters, judges, etc., that are valuable insofar as their own set of discussions that they produce. Whether or not they amount to anything is irrelevant because those debates are never really. So our model debate is not like debate about resistance strategy and then implement it. It's the debate itself is the resistance.
Would absolvency include like a global movement towards self-care?
Obviously the 1AC does not fiat global movements of self-care. That would be completely unhinged. And I have no idea how we would possibly be able to access that,
So
which is
it's
kind of the
just-
broader
it's
point of our
just-
argument.
It's just you.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be you too.
Well, how does that,
That's your choice.
how
though.
does that resolve anti-Black violence?
Well, again, like we've made a structuring claim that is an unbridgeable gap, but that does not mean that it's not worthwhile to have moments of
It's an
sociality.
unbridgeable gap. You just read like a 1AC that is like, we should go to a pizza place and like hang out. And then you say that you cannot resolve anti-Black violence. So I don't understand
Yeah.
what the point of the
So
1AC is when
the
you
world
go to a
is
pizza
bad.
place and hang out.
The world's
outside.
bad. It will continue to be bad no matter what happens in this debate. The belief that we can somehow magically make it better is problematic because it causes us to invest in forms of hope that are unrealistic, which causes psychological
So
violence.
instead of like hanging out and doing whatever you want to do, you're here telling us that the world is bad and then like perpetuating that badness by participating in competitive.
Why is competitive debate bad? That seems like a wild claim. Is that your argument?
I
Just
thought
like
that was
debates
your
are bad?
argument.
No, debates are awesome. Why do you think I'm here?
Okay.
Why do you think we like spend all this time like reading and thinking and like coming to debate tournaments? We think debate is super great.
You earlier just said that researching and doing out and out the research, spending all that energy for policy debate is bad. However, you think that debate is good. I'm not understanding what.
Yeah, we think debate is good insofar as it facilitates interesting conversations. We think that a model of debate that privileges techno-strategic readings of a given resolution are bad.
So why are in this conversation?
Why what?
In this type of debate where we talk about possible resolution, why?
Well, because we're not constrained by the topic in a way that limits our creativity and truncates us into reading lots of stuff about foreign policy and then making arguments about stuff that is ultimately irrelevant to our lives.
And that's really interesting.
And this is different because we could say whatever we want, which is a way more fun model of debate.
But it's not going to really be here for the next one. So how is that going to be?
The neg will be fine. They can disagree with the 1AC. They could disprove the F.
How, when they are prepared for specific arguments that you did not present?
Well, I mean, we think that there are sort of structural disagreements with the premise of the 1AC that you can make. You can make arguments about how, in fact, the world can get way better, or we should strive to make it better, or this like cruel optimism thing is wrong, or, you know, you could like go on Google Scholar and type in Fred Moten and then like do some reading and figure out what he's got to say, or you could ask us more questions about it. There's like a lot of things you could say in the 1NC that would produce good debates. That is like demonstrated by the last decade, including lots of debates where the 1AC reads something similar to this and the negative reads a thing that's not framework, and then the debate's awesome.
But this is not a process.
Okay.
What? Yeah.
What about if I find, what about competitive policy debate is bad in the way that you've described reading the topic?
Well, lots of reasons. So first is the distancing argument that I was making before. Second, we think it's terrible for our subjectivity. Third, we think it's racist. Fourth, it creates a model of research that teaches us to emphasize lots of things that are super problematic. The research process itself isn't fun. We think that forcing and constraining people to defend the topic is bad, even if debating the topic is good. Generally, that's fine. You could do that any debate that you want to. No one is going to stop you. We just think that you shouldn't stop us.
So creating a permanent response.
It's fun for me. It could be, but you don't, there's no need for every single debate you ever have to use policy research. Also, you could read policy arguments against the 1AC.
So under your kind of.
If you read a link to the 1AC, then we will obviously have to defend it. But that would require reading, which we think is good. If you're like ground argument is the app is bad because if I have to debate 1ACs like this, I may have to open a book, then we will impact her in that argument.
You said like us saying that like in some parts and doing research is bad, but now you're asking me stuff like after.
Yeah, I'm telling you, like, read some poems, like go like for a walk in a park and then think about how it made you feel and make arguments about it.
I'm sorry, walking in the park won't help us negate your app.
That's the problem with your model of debate, is that you think that only the screen can produce the answers that you're looking for, when really you just have to look inside.
I mean, obviously you would lose the debate if you only looked inside and read analytical arguments.
Why do you think that's true?
Because I don't have any for them, because I'm not a philosopher.
So who cares?
Well, I am a philosopher.
I'm sorry.
We will not make arguments about your qualifications. Well, because instead of having to do whatever it is you're doing when you're cutting your disads that have no uniqueness, you can instead read a book of poetry and then reflect on how you feel about it. That would be a better use of your time than cutting your 40th NATO bad card without a uniqueness argument. Yeah, for sure. Well, no, that's not true. We think the 1AC has to defend a proposal that is contestable, and we think that the negative wins if they successfully argue that that proposal is bad. Name all 1,000.
We could go on JSTOR and look at like the new.
I could.
No, I mean, functional limits obviously disprove this. All of those random philosophers who say nothing but make sweeping claims about the world get crushed by the cap game.
Guys, I think we should read the cap.
The model is just about shifting from from policy to planning.
Yes.
There's nothing about the resolution that constrains that. So theoretically, any app, they have that was run on any topic. Or that.
Well, yes, but you could say policy good, which you are obviously prepared to defend because you are so convinced that you should spend your whole life learning about policy. If that's true, you should take. Well, it certainly is a reason that the 1AC has a predictable neg strategy at hand. If you're not capable of defending policy debate, then you should probably rethink why you're doing it.
In the undercommons, what does institutional engagement look like?
We don't do it. We
Okay.
think we don't think we should have any political responsibility.
Awesome.
Yeah, we read a piece of evidence that's like, what if this is an abdication of political responsibility? And our author's response is just the word whatever. What? I mean, we just think it's a waste of time. We think it's a waste of time.
Wait, so like engagement with the
Yeah, you got me there. Yeah, so engaging with the state. What I mean by waste of time in this context is that it will invest us with the hope that the state can improve and change and get better when we have read arguments that it cannot do that, which is bad for us, because then we will have all this hope about, things improving. And then, we look at our 538 on towards the end of 2016 and think that our hero Hillary is going to win, and then wake up the next morning and Trump has won the election. That is that sort of like trauma that existed on that morning will happen over and over and over again, the more we invest in liberal institutionalism.
Why are you sad that Trump won the election?
Yeah, I think he's a bad guy. If you want to go for Trump good, be my guest. We will certainly have that debate with you.
Okay, cool. So is there a difference between Trump and Clinton?
Both are terrible, for different reasons. I think that, you know, you can make some reasonable arguments about why Trump is even worse.
Okay.
So just back to like the very basics of it, about like hanging out, and that is what we should do. So like when we play basketball outside, does that make any of us less ready?
It makes it, does it, would you say it improves your like friendships with the people you're playing with?
Sure.
Then that is good. That is our argument.
Why
The
does-
world is bad, but you can make friends and then still have a good time. That is our argument.
Playing about logistics and things like that being part of like the real life of thought, people being better than other people. But what if they really connect with the people around us, feel confident? Because you made a unique society, you made like a really large impact, and then you advocacy doesn't seem to solve.
Well, so our argument about logistics is a reason why traditional modes of policy debate are bad because they further that process of logistics. Our argument is that refusing to engage in the logic of self-improvement in policy frustrates logistics and makes resistance incapturable. As soon as you attach a telos to that resistance, then the state can circumvent your strategy and cut it off from its telos, which is why divide and conquer strategies work, surveillance, hotspotting, policing, etc. Which is why we need to stop thinking of resistance as having some end goal of solvency. Okay, we can pause for a second because this has been like 40 minutes at this point. Does anyone have like ideas for negative strategies that occurred from this discussion?
The CAPK?
Yeah, CAPK's looking pretty good. CAPK's looking real good. What sort of leads you to think that?
When I was like, how do we engage with institutions in the undercommons? We're just like, we don't.
Right, yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. What else? CAPK, more CAPK links from this cross-ex?
I guess that you don't like.
Yeah, we're explicitly the opposite of it.
I thought we were getting a little bit into like framework arguments about limits,
Uh-huh.
and I guess yours have grown a lot smarter. Yeah, I think limits.
Okay. Yeah. So like limits link turn to burnout. Yeah, that was pretty good.
It's like the niche case strat against this app, in your opinion.
I mean, there's like a lot of people who disagree with Moten and Harney. You could like cut some cards about it. The CAPK is generally not super good because 2AC permutation evidence is of such high quality. And the CAPK kind of has to beat the distancing DA in order to have an impact that outweighs the AF. And so you basically have to win a framework debate in order to get your CAPK. So at that point, you might as well go for framework. So I would say T or a specific K of the 1AC that engages it. The second one is better than the first one, but obviously, like, you know, you have like lives, so you don't have time to do a case thing for every random KF.
Do you think,
this
like-
one is pretty prominent, so
like-
it's probably worth it.
I've like never gone for a K against the KF, like my partner takes it sometimes, but like are like very, I guess they're like Ks that critique like one aspect of the app's like presentation. Like, are those fair game, or is there like a very easy like turn to be made?
So I think that you could pick out of it, and then for this one in particular, and maybe apps generally, there's a lot of criticisms of people who are like, this steals my labor, or like, you can't take parts of my 1AC, that is a mode of governance. And the
Okay.
idea and sort of facilitates a neoliberal understanding of ownership, which is very like opposite of Moten and Harney, who think that scholarship should advance through revision, which is just like a constant process of engagement and reshuffling. So side of defending that the 1 in C's pick is not an improvement, but is a revision. Could be
Okay,
pretty good.
I see.
And you could like cut some cards from like All Incomplete about this. It's their newest book. I mean, my like defense of why the ballot matters wasn't amazing, but it also, I think, answers the ballot pick pretty well, which is just like, the ballot pick is good because it's like investing in the ballot is a bad idea. Like there's an offensive argument about it, but I think good 1As will not make arguments that invest super heavily in the ballot, or if they do, they'll be like reading a bunch of cards about why ballots matter.
Would you say that? Like the ballot is.
Just like- Yeah, I guess, but like debates aren't one-off events, but instead are a process of engagement. Seems good. I think the ballot pick is like good against slow 1As who drop everything, but like pretty rough against anyone with any degree of confidence. It's like fine in the 1NC, I suppose, because like the 2AC has to spend like, I don't know, 25 seconds answering it. So you like take a little bit of time off the framework, but I don't think that the 2AC needs more than 25 seconds to answer the ballot.
Are there like other generic Ks like in the cap K category, I guess, that like are pretty good against like a lot of K apps?
What do you mean by the cap K category?
Like just Ks that could link to a lot of things.
I mean, I think that like investing in either set call or pessimism against homo apps is really, really good, because any structural criticism almost always has really good criticisms of postmodernists or post-structuralists, but those people are almost always writing in response to Marx. So it is a little easier for the AF to win offense against the cap K because their authors are almost always talking about Marx.
Yeah,
So like Deleuze, for example, or Baudrillard or whoever. And so set call or anti-blackness Afro-pessimism version would, I think, be very, very good to have against that. There's also like a lot of Lacan potential, but that's a higher degree of difficulty, I think, because there aren't as many judges who are as familiar with it, and so you have to get very good at explanation.
I see. Okay.
Just for some context on what's going on, the only A's that people read against our app last year, that one app for Baudrillard and effective. So I don't think, I don't think there's a good thing.
Yeah, I read Baudrillard a lot against K apps. Honestly, like, what do you think about effective altruism?
I try not to think about it.
Oh, man. Is it because like you don't like Matthew, or you think it's like a dumb K?
I just think it's bad.
No. Why?
Because I think that any team who is like pretty good at debate can win that it's racist, or when the AF is an example of effective altruism and thinking that it's not as bad. Like the people writing about effective altruism say pretty heinous things. Like people who go to Black Lives Matters protests are idiots wasting their time because they could have donated to malaria clinics instead of going to a BLM protest. Like they're like, oh, the Uber you took to get to the protest, you could have spent that $9 on a malaria clinic. And it's just like, you know, I think pretty repulsive.
So yeah, like someone read like the sociopathic like ableism thing against this app, like text credit, do you think that's like a good argument?
I mean, I think that ableist critiques of language always fall into the trap of the fact that all language is phenomenological, which is to say that language is itself ableist because it is obviously barred from access for a lot of different reasons, and almost every word that you ever say to describe a thing can be construed as ableist. So I think that if you had really good cards about why sociopathic is for some reason irredeemable, then maybe. But I think that those critiques almost always link to themselves pretty aggressively and are often not a reason that the app is a bad idea. It's just like a word choice is bad.
What's the best way to find like topic Ks against chaos? Like, do
topic K's against KF.
like, do you just go to the like main thesis article and just go like cited by and then like see what?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay.
So like, processing now, like what, like, do you have like a line of something usually?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to know what you got. The only goal, I think, is to figure out what the 2R is going to, or what the 2R is going to be against your 2R, and just like skip to the end.
Like, I would go through. You can go to ask, like, what kind of questions?
You basically should ask a set of questions where you make argument that you're going to say on T without labeling it with a buzzword, and then ask for a response to that.
Like, what's focus on?
Yeah, because like, what does solvency really matter? I mean, solvency matters insofar as what is their ability to solve their impact terms to T. So like, if you win, then in order to get an impact term to T, the act has to solve the case. So like, but if you're winning that, you're probably winning anyways.
So like, do you think I should do like, in a world where there's no constraints on like action, what are we? I feel like
That's very frameworky. I mean, I think you could just ask a series of simple questions about what parts of the like what part of the 1AC defends an increase in security cooperation between the US and NATO, establish a link to your interpretation, and then start asking arguments where you fish for their impact terms to what their impact terms, because the thing they say first in cross-ex is likely going to be their 2AR.
for like processing, how do you recommend like changing clarification without broken up and just talk?
Yeah, you ask questions. So okay, give me an example of a clarification question.
Like if I don't understand what's going on.
Okay, so what word do you not understand?
I don't know. I can't think of one.
I mean, you could almost always just like Google it while the 1AC is happening.
Well, I guess just like questions about their fees type, like I can't think of it.
But okay, so if you instead of asking a question like what is the 1AC's alternative worldview, you instead read their cards or tags to figure out what their worldview is. And then you can just say the 1AC's argument for how we should understand the world is, and then you say a thing, and then you say, is that correct? And they have to answer with yes or no. And then if they say no, then you could say, well, your author says this. Are you disputing the claims in your 1AC evidence? Yeah, sure. I'll defend the Virilio after K. Sure, yeah, I'll defend the Virilio. Okay. We have, does this go till 12?
Sure.
Okay. So we only have a few minutes, but yeah, sure. I'll defend Virilio.
Are you next?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just gonna see how many people.
Well, yeah, you all have like, just like the generic ones.
Sure. Take a step back. Yeah. Okay, so I'm defending garbage, but that's fine. I got this.
What are you thinking?
Defending the Virilio critique.
In what way does it ask you going into like technology technology, does that constitute like slowing down innovation? What is it?
In what way does the AF do that?
No, sorry. Didn't
Well, I mean, our argument is that you should lose.
What?
We do it by you losing.
you slow down like the way,
Yeah, the 1AC is like must go faster. If the judge is like, don't, and for trying you lose, then that will, that solves.
How does it?
What do you mean? It prevents a bad 1AC from happening.
Wait,
Is that a real question?
but if you made a claim,
The 1AC says speed is good. The 1NC has said speed is bad. If we win that speed is bad, the judge should say speed is bad, so I did not vote for speed good. That is how the alternative solves. It does not do the 1AC. The 1AC is a bad idea. If we win, it's a bad idea, and you vote against that bad idea, it stops that bad idea from happening.
argument that the US should speed up because China is speeding up their.
Right, and we have made an argument that they shouldn't.
So, we made an argument that the US shouldn't, so what does that do about China speeding up?
Well, we've made an argument that endorsing the US speeding up is bad. We should not endorse that.
Wait, so in the world of like China speeding up.
I mean, the alternative would say that speed is bad.
Wait, so I guess the alt rejects the idea that like, we should speed up like innovation and tech, so I just had to like, the alt is mutually exclusive.
Did I read critiques of the China advantage in this 1NC, or did I not?
I guess we could be like, safe and like engaging in space.
That's my link.
Wait, is there a clarification something?
Is that a bad way?
Hmm?
Is that a bad way?
It's fine. I'm just like making sure. I'm trying to figure out what I'm defending.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm defending the space race link. Okay.
It's like the US speed up. Like,
Do you want to read my link law against the
Mm.
space, huh?
No, it's not.
cyber.
Why is the app technically oriented when both of us?
Because you said some wildly racist things about China, we think that you should lose for doing that.
But, okay, if we decided what China's doing and what tech they're specifically developing to go into space, why is that?
That is an incredibly neutral position in terms of how you think of your own scholarship, and I would encourage you to do some self-reflection about that.
Wait, so if we went Chinese space and why is it not?
Oh, well, miscalc's obviously inevitable. Come on now.
Why?
Well, I mean, a bunch of them. The first is the Kessler effect, which your own evidence says is a problem.
Wait, there's.
The second is early warning satellites will inevitably fail. When they do, there'll be a nuclear war that kills all of us. Third, we've internally turned the decision-making aspects of the app and said that the cult of speed results in a dramatological worldview, which causes democracy, where governance annihilates democracy and replaces it with authoritarianism, and that results in miscalculation being more likely. So, a world run by fascists is more likely to be
Why
bad
isn't
than a
inevitable
world of
result-
democracy.
Why didn't it have
Well, it's a reason why the 1NC links internally turn the app, and why you inevitably don't solve. Also, like we're not going to make framework arguments about you not getting away your case, but let's cut the nonsense of solves extinction now. Like, let's be real. You don't do anything. It's just an idea for, a thing that a proposal you think is good. We'll say that it's bad, but let's not pretend like we have our hands on the levers of power, because that's just like all kinds of garbage.
Would you say that if you hadn't made that argument on a framework?
What do you mean?
Like, make the fiat illusory framework argument in context?
Yeah, why not? What's the downside?
So like you weren't situated like a vague scenario for early warning satellite alone, but like we've said that the way the like vulnerability of them is the cybersecurity standard. So like what
Yeah, we think technology is unfixable, and the belief that it is fixable is what makes accidents more
why
likely.
is it
Well, we've read a bunch of cards in the 1NC about the 1AC's early warning satellites on case. We will use those pieces of evidence to disprove
so like
the idea that that's a cybersecurity standard can stop war. Just look at yourself in the mirror and think about what you're saying.
Okay, so it's potential for negligence that like this town does if there was an actual that the town had.
No, we think that either you could do it any number of ways. There'll be a debate that happens. We think our 1NC evidence makes broader claims about the acceleration of technology, making the risk of the accident more and more likely, which has been proven by every single relevant world-changing technology has at some point failed and caused a serious calamity.
Well, like if there are so many instances of like failure and calamities that haven't risen to the existential level, then like.
Well, yeah, none of your stuff has risen to an existential level either. So if we're going to talk empirics, the 1AC is a pile of nonsense.
Wait, can you like pretend that you also have a little about like student development, like
Sure, yeah. I guess we've said one off Aurelio then in this debate. Excellent. Love to see it. I would probably make more arguments about like the ontology of speed or some nonsense like that, like because I've read some cards about Aurelio but don't really know the arguments, so I'm probably going to make ontology arguments at random, whether or not they're applicable to literature.
Okay, so if the all is like, wait, this is now a question.
Okay.
The all is a refusal of the app, and how does it like it just says the app is really outside and how does it solve like the external impact of like broader accident that's not direct result of it?
Well, because we will make arguments about sort of like refusing the participation in the cult of speed is good in of itself and is the only way of slowing things down.
So like what is slowing things down?
It looks like voting negative.
Like in the world of voting, like what does
Look, this is very simple.
It's not.
The judge has two choices. Choice one, vote affirmative. Speed is good. Choice two, vote negative. Speed is bad. We think they should take choice two. So in terms of how the alternative interacts with the plan, there are two choices. You could either do the plan or you could do nothing in the instance of the plan. We think that you should do nothing in the instance of the plan because literally anything else would be better than what you have proposed.
So just to finish, you said speed bad, but the alt isn't just slow down, but it's something like that.
Well, no, the alternative is vote negative. Do not do the plan. The alternative is do not do the plan because the plan is a bad idea. If we demonstrate the plan is a bad idea, that is sufficient reason to vote negative.
There's a lot of conferences probably not just specific, about like technical bad or speed is bad. So why don't you just go?
Well, no, I've only talked about them in terms of the 1AC because the 1AC has explicitly defended those technologies as good. I have said that those technologies are bad. So you get to win. If you win, the 1AC is a good idea. You win the debate. If we win, that is a bad idea, then we should win the debate. That is our only argument.
So you've not, wait, so you have not made, wait, like, this argument about like.
Look, the alternative, the negative does not have the burden of proof.
But,
If
like,
we meet the burden of rejoinder and disprove the 1AC, that is sufficient reason to vote negative, period.
What about the money to cause like this democracy impacting tension about like the government annihilating democracy?
Well, our argument is that the 1AC's cohesion advantage is an example of that because it forces NATO member states to tacitly consent to overarching decisions in the name of,
The ones. Or like,
yeah, and we think that's bad.
but like,
Yes, thank you. You've conceded the link argument. You've just said the 1AC is an example of authoritarianism. That is great. We will go for that link argument now.
democracy go up, like, causes extinction.
Yes, democracy broadly is bad. The app is an example of it.
So like.
Ipso facto, vote
why
nay.
is that- why is it actual- like democracy
Well,
other-
it rejects an instance of it. That is better than, so, okay. If you get to pick option one, authoritarianism good, option two, authoritarianism bad, we think you should vote for authoritarianism bad.
I'm on the fence about that one.
No, but provide democracy values?
So in the context of the 1AC, it's our Virilio evidence about cohesion resulting in NATO becoming an authoritarian decision-making body, which prioritizes making decisions fast over making the right decisions. That causes them to miscalculate. Now, I don't know if the 1AC will directly result in extinction, but we do think it'll result in accumulation of increased likelihood of A, miscalculation, and B, violent things like, I don't know, cyber attacking
So it's
Russia.
like a good decide difference for what is discount for like what, like, do you have an external impact or like, is it just like an internal?
Well, I mean, our external impact is that if we do not say no to speed when presented the choice, we will continue to believe that it is good and it will continue to overrun democracy and society generally, which results in a civilizational collapsing accident.
So the alt is like a explicit, like embracing a different relationship.
No, the alt is when choosing between endorsing speed or not endorsing speed, we should choose to not. So we should prefer not to do the 1AC. It does not say there's like some magical set of actions that saves everyone and saves the world. Obviously, it says that in life, you will have choices about whether to endorse democracy / authoritarianism or not endorse it. And when those instances come up, such as this one, because the 1AC was 8 minutes of authoritarianism good, you should not endorse it.
Do you think this is how the 2NC should, or the alt should be explained in the speech as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Because like, how does the alt solve? It like
Yeah,
doesn't
you're right.
the alt doesn't solve any of the external offense. And at that point, like you might as well just like read a counterplan to ban tech.
if you have like Turner yesterday, we were talking about this, it was like, maybe for like certain apps, you want it to be like a very narrow link argument about like representations of like a race or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And then the alt should be like a plan inclusive K where it's
Yeah, that
like,
sounds great.
okay.
I think that like if you wanted to read a very narrow critique of a specific framing of speed, make the arguments that speed and technology are distinct, which is why your tech good impact terms aren't applicable. And then a 1NC PIK where you explicitly pick out of it. I think that's great.
But in the
It's
case,
I think it's like pretty bad as like a one-off K, but I think it's
Right.
pretty good to just have like an explicit pick in the 1NC with like a big like 7-off next round.
so, but in the case of this strategy, you would probably have to defend tech bad. To some extent.
I think if you're just going like one-off tech bad K, then probably.
Okay,
But I think the reason Virilio is so good on this topic is that you could read a very narrow version of it with a very narrow alternative, and
Okay.
then get good at explaining why speed and technology are not the same thing.
right,
So tech good is not responsive.
makes sense.
That's a good question. Most of the time the answer is no, but it's always like good to have a card, because if you actually do find a card that makes a good distinction, then you'll be able to easily reference it and like read it in the 2NC along with your explanation. So I think cards always help. I'll stop recording actually.